He spoiled his mistress, while his pregnant wife suffered, but this billionaire wasn't ready for karma. We often see millionaires flaunting their wealth, private jets, high-end cars, and sprawling mansions, but behind those golden gates, some secrets are darker than we can ever imagine. Meet David Stone, a man whose empire seemed invincible. Loved by the public for his business prowess and admired by peers for his relentless ambition, he was the image of success. Yet beneath his polished smile lay a secret that would unravel his entire world, an affair with a cunning mistress, lavishly funded, while his devoted wife silently suffered at home. Little did he know, karma was watching, and it was ready to strike in the most unexpected way. David Stone was not born into wealth. He grew up in a modest suburban home in Riverside, spending most of his childhood sharing a cramped space with his parents, Sam and Judith Stone, and his younger sister, Stephanie. They were a hard-working family. Sam did double shifts at a local manufacturing plant, while Judith worked as a waitress to make ends meet. Despite humble beginnings, David always imagined himself destined for more. Perhaps it was the worn paint on the walls of his childhood bedroom that fueled his dreams of grandeur, or the second-hand clothes he had to wear at school that motivated him to pursue riches with unrelenting ferocity. Even as a teenager, David displayed an uncanny ability to charm his way into people's good graces. Teachers admired him for his quick mind. Classmates gravitated toward his infectious confidence. There was one teacher in particular, Mr. Robert Hastings, who took David under his wing and encouraged his entrepreneurial spirit. By 15, David had already launched a small lawn mowing business in the neighborhood, swiftly outpacing older teens who'd tried to do the same. That early taste of success sparked something in him, an unquenchable thirst for money, power, and recognition. When he left Riverside for college, David enrolled at Blackwood University, where he majored in business administration. He joined all the right clubs, rubbed shoulders with affluent classmates, and nurtured connections that would prove invaluable later on. He networked incessantly. If there was a student whose parents were in real estate, David made sure he introduced himself. If there was a professor who had ties to venture capital, he attended every office hour to glean insights. By graduation, David was primed to launch a career in real estate development with unstoppable energy. Within a decade, David Stone had indeed built a modest empire of real estate holdings. His greatest strength was identifying undervalued neighborhoods before they gentrified, then renovating properties to sell for enormous profit. He also knew how to attract wealthy investors by promising lucrative returns. One of those early investors, Jake Reeves, a retiree who had come into money through a software patent, often remarked that David had a Midas touch. That sealed David's growing reputation, the man who could spin property into pure gold. Yet, in that swirl of success, David never lost the memory of living hand to mouth. And so, he buried it by chasing even more extravagant successes, bigger penthouses, flashier cars, and eventually an opulent mansion in the heart of the city's exclusive Silvercrest Heights. He soon met Elizabeth Crawford at a charity gala he attended on a whim. She was a junior publicist for a non-profit organization assigned to greet high-profile donors. Elizabeth's quiet grace struck him immediately. She was nothing like the flashy women he'd dated before. Her thoughtful questions about his childhood and his philanthropic goals hit a nerve he hadn't felt in years. Within a year of that night, they were married. For a while, it seemed like a fairy tale romance. Elizabeth was supportive and level-headed, balancing David's flamboyance with calm composure. She embraced his background, encouraged him to focus on ethical business practices, and often reminded him that he didn't need to prove anything to anyone. When they had their first child, Matthew, the Stone family felt complete, but as David's wealth continued to skyrocket, cracks began to form under the weight of his unrelenting ambition. Late-night deals, dinners with elite clients, and hush-hush meetings with potential investors became the norm. Elizabeth tried to adapt, raising Matthew mostly on her own, believing that David's devotion to work was necessary for their future security. It wasn't until David crossed paths with Vanessa Blackwell, a meticulous event planner with a magnetic aura, that his life began spiraling down a path of secrets and betrayals. Like a house built on a shaky foundation, the Stone Empire was about to face the storm of karma. Vanessa Blackwell grew up on the opposite end of the financial spectrum. Her father, Lawrence Blackwell, was a respected diplomat who traveled frequently, bringing Vanessa with him to international galas and conferences. By her early 20s, she had cultivated a taste for luxury, five-star hotels, designer apparel, and exclusive events. Yet, despite her refinement, she always felt overshadowed by her father's status. Vanessa longed for her own grandeur, unattached to family legacy. She opened a boutique event planning agency called Blackwell and Company, focusing on high-end celebrations for the city's elite. Her reputation soared quickly thanks to her impeccable attention to detail and her flair for dramatic, unforgettable experiences. Soon, if you wanted to host a fundraiser for politicians or a gala for the city's millionaires, you called Vanessa. David was introduced to Vanessa through a mutual acquaintance, Lucy West, who worked as a social coordinator for the Stone Family Foundation, a small charitable venture David had set up to bolster his public image. Lucy insisted Vanessa was the best in the business if they wanted to host a big charity ball that would dazzle the city. David, always seeking the top talent, set up a meeting. From the moment David entered Vanessa's swanky office suite, the air felt electric. Vanessa, dressed in a tailored black suit, greeted him with a confident handshake and a knowing smile. Something flickered between them, whether it was physical attraction or a recognition of shared ambition. Neither could say. Their conversation began with pleasantries about budgets and themes for the charity ball, but soon transitioned into witty banter and personal anecdotes. Within an hour, they weren't just discussing seating charts or color palettes. David was regaling her with stories from his childhood, particularly how he'd once saved up enough money from a paper route to buy his mother a special necklace. Vanessa responded by sharing about a decadent birthday trip to Paris she once organized for a wealthy couple who wanted a private viewing of the Louvre. The tension was palpable, and it only grew during subsequent meetings. David insisted they meet for lunch or dinner to finalize event details, and Vanessa never declined. Little by little, personal space vanished, replaced by subtle touches brushing his arm, a lingering glance, a laugh that lasted a moment too long. Though David wore his wedding ring at every meeting, it was as if an unspoken understanding existed. The ring did not matter. The world they inhabited felt above ordinary moral codes. In the Stone household, Elizabeth noticed David coming home later than usual. He blamed it on charity ball planning, praising how crucial Vanessa's expertise was. And while Elizabeth wanted to be involved, David assured her that everything was under control, that she needn't trouble herself with the details. Elizabeth, occupied with Matthew and her own philanthropic interests, tried not to worry. David had never given her a reason to doubt him yet. Meanwhile, Vanessa used every interaction to deepen David's fascination. She learned his preferences, his favorite wine, his love for modern art, his desire to host the most talked-about events in the city. She made sure to serve him exactly what he wanted, even before he knew he wanted it. The lines between professional collaboration and personal entanglement blurred rapidly. When the charity ball finally took place, it was a spectacular success. High-ranking officials, celebrities, and socialites mingled under shimmering chandeliers. The event raised record-breaking funds, but the real highlight, at least in David's eyes, was the after-party he shared with Vanessa. In a secluded rooftop lounge, far from the eyes of guests and Elizabeth, David kissed Vanessa for the first time. It was the spark that ignited a dangerous flame. From that point on, neither David nor Vanessa could return to a purely professional relationship. Their affair began in earnest, a secret they guarded with an unspoken pact. For David, it felt like reclaiming a thrilling sense of conquest and adventure. For Vanessa, it was a stepping stone to the life of unbridled luxury she believed she deserved. For the next few months, David lived two separate lives. By day, he was the devoted husband and father, strolling through the family's mansion in Silvercrest Heights with Elizabeth by his side and Matthew in his arms. He still attended the occasional family outing Sunday brunches with Elizabeth's parents, picking Matthew up from soccer practice when time allowed, but his focus was clearly divided. By night, or whenever he could slip away, David was Vanessa's benefactor, lover, and confidant. He gave her expensive gifts, diamond bracelets, luxury handbags, and even a brand new sports car. He adorned her in designer clothes and delighted in taking her to the most exclusive restaurants in town, some so hidden and discreet that even the paparazzi had no clue they existed. Vanessa, in turn, gave him an intoxicating sense of adoration and excitement. She treated him like a king, praising his intelligence and showering him with physical affection. It wasn't long before David began paying for Vanessa's luxuries through the Stone Family Foundation accounts or funneling money from questionable real estate deals, hoping no one would notice. He rationalized it as a marketing expense or a client entertainment fund, never mind how unethical it was. After all, he justified to himself he'd worked hard for these riches, and if it brought him pleasure to spoil someone who made him feel alive, what was the harm? However, the cracks in this double life deepened each time Elizabeth asked innocent questions. Why does the foundation's credit card bill look so high this month? She inquired one evening, noticing a suspicious spike in expenses. David brushed it off with a dismissive wave. "We've been hosting more galas, my dear. We needed supplies and down payments for venues." She nodded, trying to trust him, but a seed of doubt took root in her heart. Elizabeth's friends began to whisper too. Her childhood best friend, Christine Parker, who worked as a part-time accountant, privately offered to help Elizabeth review the foundation's finances. Elizabeth declined, not wanting to stir unnecessary drama. She was still determined to believe David had things under control. As for Vanessa, she played the role of the discreet mistress well. On social media, she was careful not to post any photos with David. Instead, she hinted at her lavish lifestyle pictures of her sipping champagne in penthouse suites, wearing jaw-dropping jewelry and enjoying backstage passes at high-profile events. People who followed her guessed she had some wealthy admirer, but none of them knew the full story. She preferred it that way. There was a certain thrill in keeping it all hush-hush. One night, David took Vanessa to a newly opened, members-only jazz club. Between performances, they retreated to a private lounge area. In the dimly lit alcove, David leaned in and asked, "Are you happy?" A playful smile curved on Vanessa's lips. "Ecstatic," she purred, sipping her imported cocktail. "But you know what would make me happier?" David's eyes flickered with curiosity. "Name it." Vanessa hesitated, swirling the straw in her drink. "A bigger apartment. I'm tired of that cramped place. After all, I need something that suits my status and my hosting needs." She placed her hand gently on his knee, letting the implication hang. David swallowed. The cost of real estate in the city's prime districts was astronomical, but he was too enamored to say no. "I'll see what I can do," he promised, already running through mental calculations of how to shuffle funds. What David failed to notice was that each extravagant gift, each real estate upgrade, was piling onto a mountain of both financial and moral debt. While he convinced himself that he had everything under control, the truth was he was sowing the seeds of his own demise. Elizabeth Stone had always been observant. Over the years, she'd honed an ability to read David's moods, sense the subtext in his words, and catch subtle changes in their household's atmosphere. The shift in David's behavior became more apparent with each passing day. She saw it in the way he no longer seemed interested in their routine date nights, how he checked his phone incessantly, a small smile dancing on his lips as he fired off texts. The man who once found comfort in a quiet night at home now craved constant external stimulation. She tried to rationalize it at first. David was under immense pressure, especially with the Stone family foundation's expansions and the real estate market's fluctuations. Yet, her intuition screamed that there was more to the story. Elizabeth decided it was time to look beyond the surface. She reached out to her cousin, Robert Mills, an attorney who had experience in corporate law. Over lunch at a local cafe, Elizabeth carefully broached the subject. "Rob, I might need your advice. Have you ever seen suspicious transactions in a charity fund? Ones that could be personal expenses labeled as business costs?" Robert arched an eyebrow. "It's not uncommon. It can be a red flag for fraud or mismanagement." "Why? What's going on?" Elizabeth fiddled with her teacup, her voice low. "I think David's been spending more foundation money than usual. We've had bigger events, sure, but the amounts just don't add up." Robert leaned in, concern etched on his face. "Beth, if you want me to, I can discreetly look at the public filings. The foundation's tax forms, expense reports, whatever is accessible. And if we need deeper investigation, we'll figure that out." Elizabeth nodded, grateful for his support. She hated the idea of snooping on her own husband, but the nagging feeling in her gut refused to subside. Days later, Robert confirmed that expenses for consultant fees and entertainment costs had ballooned in recent months, often without itemized receipts. It was enough to confirm Elizabeth's suspicion. David was siphoning large sums under vague categories. But why and for whom? One evening, while David was showering, Elizabeth noticed his phone buzzing on the nightstand. She glanced at the screen and saw a text message pop up. "Can't wait for our trip this weekend, V." Elizabeth's heart pounded. She knew of no trip, and she certainly wasn't V. With trembling hands, she placed the phone back as it was. In that moment, everything became clear. She felt the floor drop beneath her, as if someone had suddenly knocked the wind out of her. Elizabeth had never believed David capable of such betrayal. Yes, they'd had arguments about his spending, about his inflated ego, but an affair? She staggered to the bathroom, tears burning her eyes. That night, she waited until David fell asleep. She tiptoed to the living room, turned on a single lamp, and sat on the plush couch that overlooked their meticulously landscaped garden. Hours seemed to stretch as she weighed her options. She could confront him immediately, but her emotions were still raw. Instead, she resolved to keep her discovery secret for now, to quietly gather more information. If David was leading a double life, she wanted undeniable proof before making any drastic decisions. In the meantime, Elizabeth focused on maintaining her composure. She still accompanied David to social events, playing the dutiful wife while observing his behavior with a new lens. A fleeting phone call he took by the pool, a secretive text message he read under the dinner table, the random excuses he made whenever she suggested a weekend getaway, everything now had a sinister undertone. Though her heart ached, Elizabeth found a strange sense of determination in her sorrow. If David was willing to lie and cheat, she would prepare herself to protect her son, her own financial interests, and her dignity. She knew that if or when she confronted David, there would be no turning back. The next chapter of their lives would be defined by that moment. Unaware that Elizabeth was onto him, David felt increasingly invincible. His real estate ventures continued to grow, though he had begun taking riskier deals to sustain his lavish spending. Some were half-baked projects in smaller cities. Others involved borrowing large sums from private investors with questionable credentials. Nonetheless, David told himself he could handle it all. He believed his business acumen could transform even the shakiest project into a profitable endeavor. Meanwhile, Vanessa demanded more attention, more money, more everything. She loved the spotlight, but hated having to hide their relationship, especially since her socialite friends kept asking who her mystery man was. One Saturday afternoon, David and Vanessa took a private flight to a secluded island resort. David had made up yet another excuse to Elizabeth, something about a property auction in Florida, while Vanessa told her friends she was organizing an exclusive wedding event at a tropical destination. The weekend was a whirlwind of sunbathing on pristine beaches, enjoying gourmet meals, and indulging in spa treatments. Vanessa wore the brand new diamond necklace David had gifted her, bought through another shady foundation invoice labeled charity raffle prizes. On the second night, as they sat on a balcony overlooking the moonlit ocean, Vanessa pressed David about their future. "I'm tired of sneaking around," she said, her voice silky but firm. "Don't you think your wife suspects something by now?" David sipped his expensive cognac, glancing out at the dark waves below. "She's never given me a reason to think she's suspicious," he lied, though a faint flicker of worry danced in his mind. "Elizabeth is traditional. She probably assumes everything is fine as long as I keep providing." Vanessa leaned closer, her tone sharpening. "Well, I don't want to be someone's dirty secret forever. I want a real life with you. I want people to know who I am. I want to be the woman on your arm, not the woman in your shadow." David hesitated. It was one thing to have an affair, another to blow up his marriage. Despite his infatuation with Vanessa, part of him still cared for Elizabeth, or at least for the image of the Stone family he'd built so carefully. "Give me time," he said at last, placing a reassuring hand on Vanessa's. "It's complicated, but I promise I am working on it." Vanessa's lips tightened. She could sense David's reluctance. Yet she craved the luxurious life he was giving her. She decided to play the long game, but inside she couldn't shake the feeling that David's promises might remain empty forever. Meanwhile, back in Silvercrest Heights, Elizabeth spent that weekend organizing a charity luncheon for underprivileged youth alone. Although the guests admired her dedication, she felt hollow. She wore her best pearls, engaged in polite conversation, and forced a gracious smile. Inside, she was seething. Every time a fellow guest casually asked, "Where's David today?" she had to offer another fabricated explanation about important meetings. When the event ended, Elizabeth retreated to the quiet sanctuary of her bedroom. Staring at her reflection in the mirror, she could hardly recognize the woman she'd become, someone living on the edge, overshadowed by a looming betrayal. A single thought calmed her. She was stronger than her circumstances. If David wanted to play this game, she would let him, quietly preparing for the day she confronted him with the truth. Though David and Vanessa believed they were discreet, rumors began to swirl among the city's upper crust. People talked house staff, chauffeurs, even doormen at exclusive buildings. Word on the street was that David Stone had been spotted wining and dining a certain event planner at odd hours, frequenting luxury boutique stores where he dropped tens of thousands of dollars at a time. The gossip reached Lucy West, the social coordinator for the Stone Family Foundation, who had first introduced David to Vanessa. Concerned about her own reputation, Lucy confided in a friend named Tracy Gonzalez, who happened to be an acquaintance of Elizabeth. Tracy, in turn, felt compelled to share the rumors during a casual lunch with Elizabeth. There was no direct accusation, just a hesitant mention. People have been saying David is getting a bit too close with an event planner. Elizabeth's face remained stoic, but inside, her emotions surged. She thanked Tracy for her concern, saying she'd look into it. Now she had confirmation from an external source. It was no longer a suspicion, it was practically common knowledge. That evening, she confronted David directly. The sun was setting over the manicured lawn, casting long shadows across the marble floors. Elizabeth stood in the foyer, arms crossed, waiting for David to return from a work meeting. When he stepped inside, removing his coat and gloves, she cleared her throat. "We need to talk," Elizabeth said, her voice steady but laced with tension. David's eyes flickered. He fumbled for a casual tone. "Sure. About what?" Elizabeth inhaled slowly, then let the words spill out. "I know about Vanessa Blackwell. I know you've been lying to me. Don't insult my intelligence by denying it." An icy stillness filled the foyer. David's mouth opened, but no sound came out at first. The color drained from his face. "Elizabeth, the first..." He stopped, uncertain how to spin this. Ultimately, he settled on half-truths. "It's not what you think. She's been helping me with some business expansions, and things got out of hand. I never meant for this." "Don't," Elizabeth snapped, cutting him off. "I've seen messages on your phone. I know the foundation funds are being misused. You're doing this while our son sleeps upstairs, David. Have you even thought about what this will do to Matthew if it all blows up?" David tried to move closer, his hands raised in a placating gesture, but Elizabeth stepped back. "Look, I know I messed up. I'll make it right. Let's handle this like adults. We can go to counseling." Elizabeth's laugh was mirthless. "Counseling? Do you think that erases the betrayal, the months of deceit? Right now, I'm more interested in protecting Matthew and myself. I need to know how bad the financial situation is." David struggled to maintain composure. "It's under control," he lied. "Yes, I borrowed some money for private investments, but the returns will cover everything soon. Please, give me time. Don't make any rash decisions." Elizabeth's shoulders sagged under the weight of the confrontation. "This isn't just about money, David. This is about trust, about decency. You can sleep in the guest room tonight. We'll talk more in the morning." Without another word, Elizabeth turned and ascended the sweeping staircase. David watched her go, his mind awhirl. For years, he had prided himself on controlling every aspect of his life, his finances, his public image, his marriage. Now, everything teetered on the edge of disaster. And for the first time, he felt a real, palpable fear that he could lose it all. In the days following the confrontation, David found himself in a precarious position. Elizabeth refused to communicate with him beyond logistical matters: who would pick Matthew up from school, what time the gardener was scheduled to come, and so forth. She spent her days consulting with Robert Mills and a financial advisor about how best to safeguard herself and Matthew should the worst unfold. At the same time, Vanessa grew impatient, sensing that something was amiss. David had cancelled several of their high-end dinners, citing work stress. He even postponed a trip they'd planned to the Italian Riviera. Determined to get answers, Vanessa marched into David's downtown office suite one afternoon, ignoring the startled expression of his assistant, Lisa Carmichael. "We need to talk," Vanessa demanded, walking past Lisa's desk and throwing open the door to David's private office. David, on a call with an investor, hastily ended the conversation. He stood up, eyes filled with exasperation. "Vanessa, what are you doing here? You can't just barge in like this." She slammed the door behind her. "I've been calling you, texting you. You've been practically ghosting me. Did something happen?" David rubbed his temples. "Look, I'm juggling a lot right now. The market is shaky, a deal is about to fall through, and the foundation's finances are being scrutinized. I just need time to sort things out. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. Sort things out? You promised me a new apartment, David. You promised me a future. Now you're dodging me like I'm the problem. She crossed her arms, her voice dripping with accusation. Is it Elizabeth? Does she know? He hesitated, which only confirmed her suspicions. She let out a bitter laugh. I see. So it's all unraveling. What now, David? Are you going to choose her? Or do you even have a choice left? David forced a sigh, his expression grim. I need to fix this without destroying everything. That includes my family, my business. I don't want to lose you, but I have to be smart. Elizabeth is, well, she's my wife. We have a child. Vanessa scoffed. So I'm just a toy for you to play with when you're bored with your lateral life? You know what? I'm done waiting. Either you make a decision, divorce Elizabeth, and let's build a real future, or I walk. David felt cornered. The walls felt like they were closing in. I can't just drop everything. You have to understand, if Elizabeth goes public with a messy divorce, I could lose investors, damage my reputation, everything I've built. At least let me handle this delicately. Vanessa's resolve hardened. You have 1 month. If you can't finalize things with Elizabeth by then, I'm gone. And I might just find someone else who can provide what you refuse to give me. She turned on her heel and stormed out, leaving David trembling in the aftermath of her ultimatum. For the first time in his life, he felt utterly powerless. In trying to have it all, a devoted wife, a stable family image, and a thrilling mistress, he was now on the brink of losing everything. Desperate to maintain his opulent lifestyle and placate both women, David resorted to reckless financial maneuvers. He liquidated legitimate assets to cover the foundation's suspicious shortfalls. He even borrowed large sums from a private lender named Thomas Caldwell, a notoriously cutthroat investor known for sky-high interest rates and ruthless collection tactics. Concurrently, Elizabeth, with the help of Robert and her financial advisor, discreetly moved some of the family's assets, her personal inheritance, a trust fund set aside for Matthew, into secure accounts David couldn't touch. She also began assembling evidence of David's misappropriation of foundation funds and his lavish spending on Vanessa. She had no immediate intention to go public with it, but she kept it in a secure folder in case. David tried to undermine her legally. As the pressure mounted, David found himself lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling of the guest room. His empire, once a towering success story, had become a house of cards. Every day brought new challenges. An investor threatened to pull out of a project, a loan payment was due to Caldwell, or Elizabeth demanded more transparency about the finances. Meanwhile, Vanessa texted him incessantly, reminding him of the ticking 1-month deadline. Sleep-deprived and haunted by stress, David began making even riskier moves. One of them involved a major real estate development on the outskirts of the city, a multi-acre property that promised enormous returns if developed into a luxury shopping plaza. David sank most of his liquid funds into it, betting on a quick flip. However, complications arose: environmental regulations, local community protests, and a sudden dip in retail demand. The project stalled, swallowing money without generating any profit. David's longtime friend and investor, Jake Reeves, tried to warn him. "Pull out now," Jake advised over a tense phone call. "Cut your losses before you're too deep. This development is a black hole," but David refused to listen. He clung to a gambler's mentality, that one big win would fix everything. Yet deep down, he sensed the tides were turning against him. He was no longer the golden boy of real estate. To some, he was a cautionary tale, a man letting personal indulgences blind him to prudent strategies. Rumors of his unprofessionalism, ducking out of important negotiations to take personal calls, spread among the business community. With each passing day, Vanessa's deadline loomed closer. Elizabeth's patience wore thinner. David started to wonder if there was any escape from the cataclysmic showdown that awaited him. Elizabeth's transformation during this period was remarkable. She had been the supportive spouse who once believed in David's vision, but now she found within herself a reservoir of resilience she never knew existed. The heartbreak remained, but it fueled a fierce determination to protect herself and Matthew. She doubled her efforts in her charity work, forging strong alliances with reputable organizations and donors. Freed from David's influence, she developed her own circle of supporters who appreciated her integrity and dedication. She also sat down with Matthew, still too young to understand the full gravity of the situation, and gently explained that Daddy is going through some business problems, reassuring him that she was there to keep life stable. In quiet moments, Elizabeth reflected on her life with David. She remembered the man who used to look at her with genuine affection, who once joined her on spontaneous weekend getaways, who had cried tears of joy when Matthew was born. Where had that man gone? The heartbreak came in waves, but each wave receded faster than the last. Over time, her sorrow gave way to clarity. People change, and sometimes the person you love becomes someone else entirely. The day before Vanessa's 1-month deadline arrived, Elizabeth invited David to sit down at the dining table, a table that once hosted cozy family dinners, now steeped in tension. "I've decided," Elizabeth began, her voice steady, "that I can't continue like this. I'm filing for a legal separation, effective immediately." David's eyes widened. He glanced around the room, as though searching for an escape. "Elizabeth, wait. We can talk about this. I'm not ready for that. My finances are tied up, but I'm working on a solution." She shook her head. "We're past that point. I've spoken to lawyers. We'll handle this civilly for Matthew's sake, but you need to move out. I won't have you staying in this house when every moment is a lie." He looked crestfallen, but a spark of anger surfaced. "This is my house too. You have no right to kick me out." Elizabeth's calm gaze cut through his indignation. "My lawyers will be in touch. We both know this property is in my name as well. You can do this the easy way or make things harder for yourself." The conversation ended with David packing a suitcase and heading to a penthouse he'd secretly rented for his rendezvous with Vanessa. The irony was excruciating. He was finally free to be with his mistress, but at the cost of his marriage, his reputation, and a significant portion of his fortune. As he drove toward Vanessa's place, his phone buzzed with a text. "Is it done? Are we free to be together?" From Vanessa. His reply was terse. "I left. We'll talk tonight." At first, Vanessa was elated. David had seemingly chosen her, which meant she could occupy his life openly. She decorated the penthouse with fresh flowers, prepared a lavish dinner, and dressed in a figure-hugging gown. When David arrived, she threw her arms around him, but she quickly realized he was not in a celebratory mood. His face was lined with exhaustion and worry. "What's wrong?" she asked, leading him to the couch. David sank down, head in his hands. "It's over. With Elizabeth, my comfortable life, everything. She's filing for separation, maybe even divorce. That means I'll probably lose half my assets, plus I have major debts to pay off. I can't keep living like I used to." Vanessa's joy shriveled. "But you said you had projects in the pipeline." "The returns, they're stalled or failing," David muttered. "I'm drowning in loans, and the Foundation's board might launch an internal audit once Elizabeth raises questions about irregularities. I'm finished if that happens." Vanessa felt panic rising. "Wait, so we're not going to have the same lifestyle?" David glared at her, frustration etched in every line of his face. "I'll do what I can, but you have to be realistic. There might not be private jets or endless shopping sprees for a while." Tension crackled between them. This was not the fairy tale ending Vanessa had envisioned. Over the following weeks, she watched David struggle to salvage his collapsing empire. Investors pulled out. The city's press got wind of financial discrepancies in the Stone family foundation. Journalists began digging, and rumors of David's affair circulated on gossip blogs. The final blow came when Thomas Caldwell, the private lender, threatened legal action. He demanded immediate repayment of his loan, plus an exorbitant amount in fees and interest. David was cornered. He couldn't repay Caldwell without selling off valuable properties at a loss. And with the real estate market cooling, he wouldn't recoup enough to clear the debt. Vanessa, who thrived on wealth and social prestige, felt increasingly trapped. One evening, she approached David, who was hunched over the kitchen counter with stacks of documents scattered around him. "We need to talk," she said. He looked up, his eyes bloodshot from stress. "What now?" She bit her lip. "You know I care about you, but I can't live like this. We're always stressed, always on the brink of another crisis. You promised me stability and a life of luxury. It's not happening." David's temper flared. "So, you're leaving too? Just like that? After all I've given you?" Vanessa's tone was cool. "You gave me promises. And now you have nothing left to give." David raked his hands through his hair. He wanted to rage at her, call her ungrateful, but deep down he knew she was right. He'd gambled everything, his marriage, his moral compass, only to end up with empty hands. In that brutal moment, he saw the harsh truth. Once the money was gone, Vanessa had no incentive to stay. That night, she packed her belongings and left the penthouse. David didn't try to stop her. The next morning, she boarded a plane to Monaco, financed by yet another unsuspecting wealthy acquaintance, leaving David alone in the ruins of a life he had built on lies and extravagance. With Vanessa gone and Elizabeth finalizing divorce proceedings, David Stone found himself utterly alone. His phone rang incessantly with calls from creditors, lawyers, and disgruntled partners. The press hounded him for statements on the foundation's alleged financial misconduct. Even old friends like Jake Reeves distanced themselves, not wanting to be associated with a scandal. In the midst of this maelstrom, Elizabeth carefully orchestrated her exit. She secured an excellent legal team, ensuring the divorce settlement would grant her full custody of Matthew and a significant portion of the remaining legitimate assets. She moved out of the mansion in Silvercrest Heights and into a more modest, yet comfortable, home closer to her parents. She found solace in her newfound independence, focusing on philanthropic initiatives that genuinely served people, untainted by David's corruption. The once mighty David Stone saw his net worth plummet. Properties were seized or sold at auction, the Stone Family Foundation was dismantled amidst public scrutiny, and lawsuits began piling up. David tried to keep a low profile to dodge reporters and, more frighteningly, to evade Thomas Caldwell's relentless attempts to collect. One chilly autumn afternoon, David sat in a nearly empty apartment that he had rented in a middle-class neighborhood, a stark contrast to the palatial homes he once owned. The minimalist furnishings consisted of a bed, a table, and a single couch. He stared at a photograph of himself, Elizabeth, and Matthew from years back, taken at a theme park. In the picture, they were beaming with joy, a family unburdened by scandal. He felt a lump in his throat. Where had he gone wrong? Perhaps at every step, he mused, from the moment he let his ambition eclipse his moral judgment. In chasing wealth and excitement, he'd lost sight of what truly mattered: love, integrity, and the trust of those closest to him. In the months that followed Vanessa's departure and the collapse of his empire, David Stone drifted between disillusionment and soul-searching. Gone were the days of chauffeured cars, five-star dinners, and the constant buzz of high-stakes deals. He was alone in a sparsely furnished, mid-priced apartment on the edge of town, a place where nobody cared about his former status or his fall from grace. Every time he stepped outside, he felt ghosts of his old life lurking on every corner, reminding him of what he once had and how carelessly he'd thrown it all away. Distant from the city's spotlight, David found unexpected solace in the mundane. He discovered a small cafe 5 blocks down a neighborhood joint run by an older couple, Mr. and Miss S. Patel, who greeted him with kind smiles and never asked intrusive questions. The gentle hum of their place, the rattle of coffee cups, and the warm smell of fresh bread offered David a fragile sense of normalcy he'd never truly experienced as an adult. He started visiting daily, sitting in a corner booth with a newspaper, staring at headlines that had once been about him. Though he was far from comfortable, this simpler existence forced him to confront parts of himself he'd avoided for years: his insatiable need for approval, his willingness to deceive for personal gain, and the empty pride that had guided his every move. He picked up old habits he'd long abandoned, like running early in the morning, alone in the crisp air, feeling his heartbeat surge in a way that had nothing to do with spreadsheets or secret trysts. One day, while sipping a black coffee at the cafe, David received an unexpected text from Elizabeth. "We need to discuss Matthew's school arrangements for next year. Let's meet." Despite the tension that still hung between them, David clutched the phone with trembling hands, relieved that she was reaching out. Without hesitation, he replied that he was available whenever she wished. They chose a public place, a bright, open eatery with wide windows and a steady stream of customers. Elizabeth arrived first, glancing around until she spotted David by a small table near the window. He rose to greet her, self-conscious about his worn jacket and the dark circles under his eyes. Elizabeth, on the other hand, looked poised and quietly confident in a simple blouse and slacks. The transformation in both of them was stark. She carried herself with a certain peaceful self-assurance, while he seemed weighed down by guilt and regret. "Thank you for coming," David said softly, pulling out a chair for her. Her guarded expression made it clear that trust was still a fragile commodity between them. "I'm here for Matthew," she replied, taking a seat. "He'll be finishing his current school term soon, and I'm looking at new opportunities, maybe a private academy that focuses on the arts. He's shown real talent in drawing and painting lately. He's also started piano lessons." David listened, the corners of his mouth curving into a small, wistful smile. The mention of Matthew's newfound artistic streak stirred memories of the times he'd carried a toddler version of his son around art galleries, pointing out bold colors on canvas. "That's wonderful," he said. "He always did love doodling on the walls when he was little. I'm glad he's thriving." "Really?" Elizabeth acknowledged his words with a subtle nod. She slid a folder across the table. "These are some brochures and enrollment forms. I wanted to offer you the chance to be involved, at least in a consultative way. I'm not looking for funding help or anything. You've made it clear. Your finances are stretched. But as his father, if you want to be part of this decision, here's the information." David exhaled slowly, thumbing through the glossy pages. His heart clenched at the realization of how distant he'd become from Matthew's life. "I appreciate that," he finally said, meeting her eyes. "I know I'm not in a position to give him what he needs financially right now. But if there's anything else I can do, pick him up from practice, help with his homework, or just be there for him, I want to try." Elizabeth studied him silently. She could see the lines of exhaustion etched into his face, but also a genuine sense of humility. "He asks about you," she admitted, lowering her gaze. "He wonders why you don't visit more often, why you left. I didn't want to poison his mind with adult problems, so I've kept it vague. But I've also been honest enough to tell him that you and I decided to live separately." David felt a pang in his chest. I understand. I'd like to talk to him, if that's okay. Perhaps we can start slow weekend visits. Maybe a lunch or two. I'm not expecting to walk back in as if nothing happened, but I'd like a chance to be his father again. Elizabeth glanced out the window, watching a couple strolling hand in hand on the sidewalk. She closed her eyes briefly, recalling all the pain David had caused. But she also remembered the moments when David had been a caring, devoted father. Perhaps, buried under the wreckage of his bad decisions, some remnant of that man still existed. "We can try," she said, her voice measured, "but it's going to be on my terms. I won't let Matthew get hurt again." David nodded, relief coursing through him. "I'll do whatever it takes." They spent the next hour discussing school details, potential extracurriculars, and ways David might slowly reintroduce himself into Matthew's routine. The conversation was civil, even tinged with moments of genuine warmth when they reminisced about Matthew's early milestones. It was a far cry from the high-tension standoffs of the past year, and though the pain was still palpable, there was a fragile thread of respect weaving itself between them again. Before they parted, David took a deep breath. "There's something else. I wanted to apologize for more than just the affair. I'm sorry for neglecting you, for making you feel invisible. I was so obsessed with my own image and ambitions that I lost sight of what mattered. I can't take back the harm I caused, but I hope you'll believe I'm trying to be better." Elizabeth's eyes flickered with an emotion he couldn't quite read, sorrow maybe, but also a trace of empathy. "I've heard apologies before," she responded carefully, standing up. "Words aren't enough, but if you keep showing up for Matthew and continue being straightforward with me, maybe time can mend things at least, so we can co-parent." David nodded, realizing that was the best he could hope for. They walked to the exit in silence. Outside, the late afternoon sun bathed the sidewalk in a golden glow. Elizabeth offered a polite goodbye, then headed toward her car. David lingered for a moment, watching her drive off, wondering if the sense of hope stirring in him was real or just another illusion. In the following weeks, David took his first halting steps toward redemption. He called Matthew every evening, briefly at first, asking about school projects and favorite cartoons. The awkwardness was evident. Matthew's tone was guarded, uncertain how to act around a father he rarely saw. But David persisted, offering praise for good grades, expressing genuine curiosity about Matthew's drawings, and promising to see him soon. He also reached out to a local non-profit that offered free financial literacy workshops for low-income families. It was ironic, perhaps, that a man who once misused a charity foundation now found solace volunteering for one. But the quiet act of handing out pamphlets, organizing budgets, and helping people navigate life's monetary pitfalls grounded him. It reminded him how fragile security could be and how easily greed could destroy it. Eventually, Elizabeth allowed David to join them for a Saturday afternoon at a local arts fair where Matthew's drawings were on display. Though the reunion was uneasy, Matthew stuck close to Elizabeth at first. David made an effort to praise his son's artwork, ask about each piece, and offer heartfelt compliments. By the end of the day, Matthew had softened just enough to show him a new sketchbook, and David ruffled his hair affectionately, a small grin on his face. Bit by bit, David found that humility was his only path forward. He stopped trying to secure massive deals or reclaim a flashy lifestyle. Instead, he focused on small, manageable tasks, paying off his debts incrementally, seeking stable employment with a modest firm that could use his real estate experience, and proving to Matthew and Elizabeth that he would no longer place personal ambition above their well-being. He knew the road to rebuilding trust was long and fraught with potholes. But each time he saw Matthew's shy smile or heard Elizabeth's voice soften ever so slightly, He realized these small signs of acceptance were worth more than any business venture could ever yield. The emptiness that once drove him to vanity and greed was slowly replaced by a humbled sense of gratitude for second chances, for the son who still welcomed him with cautious hope, and for the ex-wife who, despite everything, would always be the mother of his child. One cool autumn evening, David found himself back at that small neighborhood cafe, sipping black coffee as he pondered his future. The wind outside rattled the doors, and leaves skittered across the pavement. He thought of how the seasons changed, reflecting life's own cycles of birth, decay, and renewal. He was no longer the arrogant tycoon he once was, nor was he the groveling, desperate man whose life had crumbled overnight. He was in a different place now, one where mistakes could be stepping stones to something better, if only he chose to learn from them. In the soft glow of the cafe's hanging lights, David allowed himself a faint, hopeful smile. Redemption wouldn't come quickly or easily, but for the first time in years, he felt the stirrings of a genuine desire to live a life guided by honesty and humility rather than greed and deception. Maybe, just maybe, that was the truest success he could ever hope to achieve. David Stone's downfall is a stark reminder that no amount of wealth can shield us from the consequences of our choices. He once believed he could have it all: love, success, and a thrilling double life, only to watch everything crumble under the weight of betrayal and greed. Meanwhile, Elizabeth emerged stronger, discovering that true resilience lies in knowing your own worth and refusing to accept anything less than honesty and respect. This story shows us how quickly power can dissolve when misused, and how an unwavering moral compass can be our greatest asset. If this dramatic tale resonated with you, don't forget to hit the like button, share it with friends, and subscribe to the channel for more gripping stories and life lessons. Your support helps us create more compelling content, and we'd love to have you along for the journey. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for our next real-life drama.